By Gillette, the best a man can get.
Welcome back to First Things First. And we welcome in former NFL head coach Eric Mangini to our conversation, our inane, ridiculous conversation in the break over who could run the fastest. It's like
Jenna likes challenging random humans to races, including our, I would say, less than peak physically fit Sam Pepper.
I didn't say that.
She wanted you. I can beat you in a race. I can beat you in a race.
Not how that happened.
Okay, well then I missed it. I apologize. I think you could beat Pep in a race.
Well, thank you.
I think you could run backwards and beat Pep.
It means a lot to our audience.
We should really set the distance, though. Are we doing hundreds? Are we doing 50s? Are we doing 40s?
And what did I say? I say pick a yardage.
Yeah,
and I can do it.
Pick a yardage.
Don't tell me how many
she said pick a yardage, any paycheck, she's into it. Absolutely.
The show happens to be based on what I did after that. Okay? That's the way the show was put together. Okay?
That's correct.
It wouldn't be a long show if we talked about what Nick has done or what Jenna has not done.
Leave me out of this. I don't talk about any feats of athleticism. We did that in a test show once. It didn't go well for me.
That has those clips like going viral and...
That's where we're going to. That's where I live. I live in the little 30-second going viral.
That space.
Coach.
Charlie Dixon.
Coach, I'm sorry. You have to be a part of all our run race challenges. The NFL trend this offseason has been this, Coach Mangini. Draft a top-tier quarterback, then tell the world he's third on your depth chart behind a mediocre starter and a backup we've never heard of. But the Ravens are playing this one differently. Yes, they are. They drafted Lamar Jackson, and Lamar Jackson will reportedly play Week 1. Baltimore is planning on designing plays for their first-round pick right off the bat. Coach, how would you use Lamar Jackson if you were the Ravens?
Well, I think they're going to use him similar to the way that Greg has used quarterbacks in the past. Greg Roman, his experience in San Francisco, and it's going to be a change of pace guy, and that's difficult for defenses because you've got to get ready for the starter and what Joe Flacco brings, which is very traditional, and then you put a guy like Lamar Jackson in, and even if it's a set of 5 or 10 plays with enough variety that during the course of the week, you've got to spend a significant amount of time defensively getting ready for it. And even if he goes in for one play, you've still got to spend those reps, and it means it's less reps that you can spend on the starter. So there's real value in that. And I think that the other thing it does is give him some experience, and it gives him a package if Flacco gets hurt where he's comfortable right away.
Does it say something about Lamar Jackson, or does it say something about Joe Flacco? Because all these other teams we've talked about, none of these guys are, I mean, except maybe Sam Darnold competing with Josh McCown.
Listen, I would say none of these guys have such drastically different skill sets than who the starter is. Like if you are, so let's take what's going on in Arizona, Sam Bradford and Josh Rosen. When you're talking about what it creates for the defense, tell me if I'm getting this right, if the defense is like, oh, Josh Rosen might come in for a series, their game planning is not drastically different than if they're preparing for Sam Bradford.
No, they still play man-to-man, still play zone.
Right.
It's not going to force them to prepare that much differently. So one of the things that we have in the National Football League that we take advantage of, and the reason why New England is so successful, because one thing that we have in common, and it doesn't change, is time. How much time you have to prepare for the opposition. So if you can make, what Coach said, if you can make the opposition spend some of their allotment, because they're not getting more time than you, but if you can make them dice up the time, that no, they can't spend 75% of their time on Flacco. That now they got to be able to be like, especially the first month of the season. So now all those other teams, they got to really watch the preseason to see what they show, what Baltimore shows Lamar in. Huge advantage in that we know that we have this weapon, we know that we have this change of pace, and we're going to force you to spend a bunch of time to prepare for Lamar Jackson. I believe it's a smart thing to do, but it's also, I like the fact that you have a better chance of being successful if you come up with a plan before you draft the player. 99% of the players in the league are system players. Lamar Jackson needs a system that is different than Joe Flacco for him to be successful. So I love what Baltimore has, when they had a plan in mind when they drafted the talent.
And I remember with Alex Smith when they'd bring Colin Kaepernick even in for a play or two initially, and Colin would change things, or he'd make it a play that put a ton of pressure on the defense, and then everybody had to get ready for that. And when I drafted Brad Smith, or you were dealing with a Wildcat, the thought was easy for us, hard for them. And if you can take a guy like Lamar and show that he's not just a running quarterback, but he can actually throw the ball, it changes things, too, defensively, because you can't just load up the box. You've got to actually honor the passing game, where with Tim Tebow, run. With Lamar Jackson, he has the ability to do both. He's radically different than Flacco, and it eats up time, reps, effort, energy from your opponent.
And like we've talked about this from the angle for the Ravens as an organization and for their opponents. But for Lamar, the other thing that's different about Lamar than the 4 quarterbacks taken ahead of him, all 4 of those quarterbacks right now legitimately believe, I can win this starting job. I can be the week 1 starter. That gives whatever motivation they have, that's extra motivation. I can be the week 1 starter my rookie season. Lamar's the one guy drafted of the 5 first-rounders where the team has a quarterback in place they've won a Super Bowl with, they feel very comfortable with. Lamar realistically can't be the week 1 starter, so barring an injury. So what this does is it gives him extra, I don't want to even call it motivation, but it gives him more incentive and more something to be excited for. Like, I'm not guaranteed to just sit on the sideline week 1. They have a plan for me. And we talked about this over the weekend, have to think about the organization that drafted Lamar Jackson. They drafted before, a long time ago, we forget about it. They drafted Tyrod Taylor. Yep. He sat behind Joe Flacco for 4 years and developed. I think Ozzie Newsome and that organization were ready to transition to a different era of quarterback, not as traditional statue in the pocket like Flacco. The problem was Flacco then won a Super Bowl and played so well that
coming off a terrible year that maybe now the offense is ready to go in a different direction.
The thing that I like what he said is I have someone there to support the talent, because even Baltimore, they draft a guy, they drafted Lamar Jackson as a running quarterback, but if they don't have Greg Roman there, I'm not as comfortable. Because Greg Roman has chapter and volume of NFL film that he can show Lamar and be like, I got a package for you. Here it is. I can unveil it. This is how we did it before. Now, he's a better thrower of the football than Cap was early, a little more elusive than Cap was. So I'm very interested to see what they're going to do there in Baltimore, Coach.
And my question is, what's the real goal of the coaching staff? Is this goal just to put pressure on the defense? Or is this a goal to say, hey, this guy can really play, and this guy should be our starting quarterback? But sometimes with ownership and people in the front office, you've got to show them before you can make a decision like that, especially when you've got a guy like they do with Joe Flacco. Is the goal to put a bunch of pressure on Joe Flacco saying, you're not performing the way we expect you to do, they expect you, you're not doing the things we think you should be doing. Here's a nice healthy dose of pressure. So deal with that and either perform better or be prepared to be replaced.
Do you think that with Greg Roman being their offensive coordinator there, do you think this is what they had in mind before the draft, before they knew Lamar Jackson was coming when they signed RG3? That the idea of signing RG3 was to maybe get him on the field in these types of packages to give the different change of pace? Is that because it is interesting to me that this is the team that signed RG3. Now they ended up moving up to go get Lamar, so RG3 we think has been bumped down on the depth chart. But do you think that's what they had in mind with that move?
Well, they also were one of the few teams that were going down the road with Colin Kaepernick, too. So, yeah, I do think this is what they have in mind. This is what they want to move towards. In terms of Joe Flacco, though, he has performed at a very high level. He's only missed he's only had 1 losing season and no losing season when he was actually the starter for full 16 games and won the Super Bowl. So it would be hard for me as ownership to say it's time to move on and radically change.
This is the last year that Flacco has guaranteed money in his contract, and that's significant.
All right, Coach, we'll see you a little bit later on the show. Stick around, though. Coming up next, the Jazz strike back. We'll show you how they did it next on First Things First.